Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar, Financial Uncertainty, the Problems and the Solution. You know, the Torah is not a history book, but rather it's a guide for life. After the creation of the first day, the Torah says, Vayi Erev, Vayi Boker, Yom Echad. There was 12 hours of darkness, there was 12 hours of light. It made one complete day. Now, on a simple level, it's telling us the history, what happened after the first day of creation. But on a deeper level, on a more personal level, think about our lives. Our lives are made up of days. We're born on day one. The days become weeks, the weeks become months, the months become years, the years become decades, but it's all days. If you think about the days, there's always a night and a day. There's always darkness and light. The world is in a state of darkness at the moment. This pandemic that we're going through has brought darkness not only on a health level, but economically as well. And the question is there light after this darkness, and what should we be doing? So to discuss the problems and maybe the solutions here this evening, we have three very special people. We're going to hear from Clive Spitz, a banker who holds a senior position at Standard Bank, and he'll be followed by Jeff Miller, who's in retail and hospitality. That sector has really been hit. And then we'll hear the spiritual dimension from Rabbi Yehuda Stern. So guys, over to you. Let's start with you, Clive, and you'll go straight over to Jeff.
Thank you, Rabbi. I guess with a lineup like this, you gave me an introduction to a small joke that I've heard before. A banker, a retailer, and a rabbit walk into a bar. The banker goes up to the bartender, says, "I'll have a scotch, please." The bartender says, "No problem." Hands the guy a scotch. The retailer says, "I'll have a scotch too." Says, "Sure, coming right up. Here's your scotch, sir." Then the rabbit goes up to the bartender and says, "I'll also have a scotch." He says, "No, you're not here really. You only here due to autocorrect." So anyway, my hat off to Nick Rabinovitz for what he does at this time. Thank you for having me. I couldn't say no to Rabbi Masinta. And thank you to my esteemed fellow panelists. I'm grateful that you guys are here, so that potentially there's a bit of a crowd here tonight as well, because they didn't come to hear me, they came to hear you. A disclaimer, first of all, these are my personal views, they're not those of Standard Bank, and I'm not providing any financial advice at this point in time. So the rabbi came with a financial uncertainty, the problem, and the solution. There's no doubt that the human, social, and economic impact of this pandemic is significant. The COVID-19 update for today was about 13.5 million people infected with the disease, a death toll of almost 600,000, with recoveries around 8 million people. South Africa has had 300,000 infections and a recovery of 51%, but we're still the 8th worst hit country in the world. Gauteng has now more officially reported cases than China ever had. By now, most of us know of someone who has been personally affected, and my thoughts are with those that are battling the virus. Economically, we face a monstrous wave of pandemic proportions. The markets have naturally reacted negatively. Volatility has spiked. Liquidity has dried up. Emerging market risk-off drove emerging market outflows and currency weakness. However, the broad range of government interventions have provided some form of relief. From a business perspective, while the volatility supported our trading activities, the lockdowns and ensuing economic threat have negatively impacted confidence, demand, and activity levels. Inflation is relatively subdued. CPI yesterday announced of 2.1% for May, despite currency weakness. And this is probably in the last 15 years, we haven't seen a drop below 3%. Policy interest rate cuts saw cumulative decline year to date of 275 basis points. Excluding yesterday's view, Standard Bank's house view was that would be it for the year, but I think things might change. Unemployment at a staggering 30.9%, and every economist I've spoken to has expected this to grow significantly more. So really a deep recession, very pressurized time, further pressure on SOEs. We've seen Eskom this week really taking a knock. And it puts us in a very difficult position. From the bank's perspective, I can tell you our loan volumes are down, largely to do, firstly, in the beginning of lockdown, no one had anywhere to spend. but more recently, affordability. Clients, customers, you really struggle on the affordability side. On the provision side from the bank, we continue to monitor these macroeconomic variables, and we amend our forward-looking approach to make sure that we account for this. But closer to home, the impact on the SMME space. During lockdown, almost completely shut down. And the only thing that the SMMEs could turn to were cost-cutting exercises. So they reduced headcount naturally. Impacted employees significantly. Many employees were furloughed. Commission earners lost their income. Many people had to utilize their leave during that period. And really a significant impact largely, and the president referred to this, to women and to young families, the vulnerable in our society. There's been some impact from installment relief measures, but that's really just potentially a delay of the pain, and in some instances not worth looking at, but we'll explore that a little bit further on. I want to give an analogy that a friend shared with me. He says it as follows. It was a slow day in some small town. The sun is hot, the streets are deserted, times are tough, everybody's in debt, and everybody lives on credit. On this particular day, a rich tourist from back west came through town. He goes to stay at Jeff's local hotel. And the hotel manager says, "How can I help you, sir?" He says, "Look, I'd like to see your rooms." So he says, "Sure," puts down $100 on the desk. And he says, "There's the elevator, go and see whatever room, and here's the key." The wealthy tourist goes upstairs immediately. The hotel manager grabs that $100 bill and he runs down the road to the butcher. He pays the $100 to the butcher that he owed, who in turn takes the $100 to the cattle farmer that he owes. The cattle farmer runs down to the feed store, pays the $100 there, who then remembers that he's got a debt owing for a guest of his who stayed at the hotel last week, runs back to the hotel and pays the $100. In the interim, the tourist comes down the escalator, down the elevator, comes back to the desk, the $100 bill still sitting there. He says, "No, none of these rooms are up to standard for me," takes his $100 and walks out. Now, no one produced anything and no one earned anything. However, the whole town is out of debt and is looking to the future with much optimism. We need that $100 in our economy. We need stimulus, we need investment. So that's the problem. So what's the solution? So I can speak from the Standard Bank perspective. We've implemented a number of installment relief measures over this period. We have had fee waivers, we've had restructures. We've encouraged our clients to come and contact us should they find themselves in financial stress. And this is something, I think people consider quite new, because in the past you would be reluctant to approach your bank to say, times are tough. Immediately they might draw on their facilities. I think if you're in good standing, there's a massive opportunity here to come engage with the bank and to come to some form of understanding. Things are very tough, and I think the banks are understanding of this. We're currently in a closed period for our interim results. However, at the end of May, we've provided 92 billion rand in relief to individuals, SMMEs, and commercial clients. This is across South Africa, 285,000 accounts, approximately 15% of our personal and business banking portfolio. We've supported several private and government initiatives, SME COVID-19 guarantee loans, the payment of SASSA grants, reduced fees, etc. Now, the SME guarantee loan scheme is an amazing initiative introduced by Treasury and the SARB together. It's available to entities currently, and they're looking to revise it. If your turnover is under 300,000 rand per annum, 300 million rand per annum, you're eligible for this funding, and it's at prime, fixed over 5 years with a 6-month moratorium up front, and it's there to fund your working capital, which is really, these are part of the solutions in terms of putting capital back into our economy and I guess stimulating the economy in a way that we can continue to function effectively. So that is something that really, there are T's and C's, but it's something worth exploring. For those people that have lending with the banks, you need to check, do you have credit life policies with the bank? Because if you do have a credit life policy with the bank, you may very well be worthy of a claim at this point in time. So that's something to consider. Debt relief, many people speak about debt relief. I looked at the United Nations. They describe debt relief as the macroeconomic breathing space to ensure sustainability. You know, it's not necessarily worth to equate wiping out all your debts, and can cost a little bit more down the line, but if you need it, and these things are available. So as a banker, I can say it's felt somewhat good to be able to help the economy at this really challenging and very difficult time. You know, the solution for business, SMMEs, they're incredible to see what they're doing. They innovate. I'd be surprised if you don't know somebody manufacturing a mask or hand sanitizers at this point in time, because everybody I speak to in small business, that's what they're doing. But it points to their agility, it points to their quick turnaround time, and I think that is what's going to be their success in the future, as opposed to much slower corporates that take time to turn. But on the corporate side, you know, coming from the bank, we can speak for ourselves. We've had a massive surge towards our digital adoption. People don't want to go to the branch anymore. And that's been a positive thing for us, that we've seen the digital adoption really taken up. For our staff, it's been incredible in terms of flexibility and working from home. And then again, the private sector. I was chatting to a cousin of mine, I'm sure he wants to remain anonymous, earlier today, and he's in the private sector, and staggering what they've done and what they've contributed to the economy out of goodwill. It's just incredible to see how the private sector have really come forward. So to the individuals, you know, I've categorized it into two main parts in terms of the solution. I certainly don't have the solution, but I can recommend solutions just on my thoughts. Firstly, there's bad spend. What is bad spend? Well, Warren Buffett, not a banker necessarily, says don't spend what you don't have. And if you're in debt, paying it off is probably the best investment you can make. So if you take into account, you know, you're perhaps sitting with a bond, prime plus 1%, or whatever it may be, you know, it's very difficult to get a risk-free return out there that can beat that type of investment today. Filter your bank statements. Go and identify those expenses that are non-essential and cut your costs. Consider how regularly you're eating out, your clothing. Jeff, please, don't give me a hard one on this, but your leisure travel. Again, these are other businesses that are under pressure, so you have to consider and weigh it up really quite with a lot of measure to your thinking. Then there's good spend. Adhering to adjusted budget, that's good spend. Some expenses are necessary: life cover, policies, medical aid, repairs, certainly your bank. Please don't stop paying them. And then on the investment side, the value of stocks, you know, they should recover in the medium to long term. The markets have weathered many a crisis. In 2001, they had the dot-com crisis, subprime mortgage crisis in 2008, the China market crash in 2015. Really, the list goes on. So in the medium to long term, if you're able to make investment, it's certainly a place to look for opportunity today. And Jeff, no doubt you'll speak to the Section 12Js with tremendous tax benefits. You know, that's something to also to explore. So there are many investment opportunities. It depends on your risk appetite. But I implore you, every effort to continue saving for your future, for your financial needs. I guess that summarizes some of the solution, but there's one positive aspect, there are a few positive aspects that I'd like to draw out of this. You know, this has been referred to as the ultimate equalizer. And I think, yes, some people have experienced it differently, but for those with the disease, absolutely. It's the ultimate equalizer, and we're all being treated the same. And that is quite something to consider. A friend of mine said it's industrialized our community. And I think what he meant by that is the focus on kindness of the community on an industrialized level. It's been phenomenal to witness. And I think it's, you know, it's testament to what we have as a community, and certainly something to be respected. And to that point, the Ramban Fund, you know, the Geshe Fund, they've been, they've been approached for 400 cases, 120 million rand of interest being expressed. Miracle drives, acts of kindness. Rabbi Masinta and his team, incredible work that they're doing to outreach to the border community, the South African Board of Jewish Deputies. Incredible work that they're doing. And people are fearful, you know, walk around with masks. It feels like Tisha B'Av. You can't greet anyone every day. And the rabbi made a comment just before we went live here, you know, that he met with somebody earlier that they said, smile with your eyes. So we don't have our masks. We've got our masks on, so we don't have our face to necessarily full smile, but perhaps with our eyes is something to consider. For me personally, the show of understanding and flexibility that we've had in the workspace, you know, 75% of the bank's probably working from home, and it's allowed us to consider refocusing. You know, are we focusing on the right thing, spending time with our family, with our kids? It's a tremendous opportunity. And we appreciate what we have. And therefore, we are absolutely required to act responsibly in this time. And then lastly, an opportunity to be a part of it. It's a time of great pain and great need. And everybody in this instance can contribute. So, I think really wholeheartedly jump in there. Everybody can make a change. So Vleit, Mysterious 8. And I hand over to my esteemed fellow panelists to hear their views. Thank you, Rabbi.
Clive, I assume is that my key for me to take the hospital pass from the rabbi to talk about retail and hospitality in these times. Rabbi really is a hospital pass, because I don't really know, we all know what we're playing in. I mean, if you look, into the USA and the big retailers, and we just see JCPenney filing for bankruptcy, Starbucks closing hundreds of stores, Hertz filing for bankruptcy, Gap, Victoria's Secret, Forever 21, and the list goes on and on of retailers that have really been hard hit by COVID. I mean, closer to home, we've seen what's happened with Edgar's. We've seen that Bidvest Car Rentals now have announced that they're closing down, their fleet completely. And things are tough. You just have to walk through the shopping centers if you're brave enough to actually see the feet fall. Very little feet, not many people in the stores, but and many stores still closed. And that's what we have to deal with. I mean, I can talk of my own experience, and I have an investment in a company called Bride & Co. in Eurosuit, which is in the event business. We're in the bridal business. And since 25th of February or 26th of February, we're not allowed to have weddings. You're not allowed to have a matric dance. There are no events. And yet the industry is something 30 billion plus that is all affected. Yes, we sell wedding gowns and men's suits and all the rest of it, but it goes a lot deeper. You've got the caterers, you've got the halls, you've got the guys who run the discos and the bands and the catering and the waiters, and it's a huge industry that everybody has been affected. I mean, as Clive said in the beginning, or we alluded to, is that we didn't start off pre-COVID in a very strong position in South Africa, very fragile economy. And we came and had this big black swan event that's just taken us all out. I mean, I speak for the bridal business. I mean, there's probably, there's about 180 to 200,000 weddings a year, all being placed on hold. It's unlikely that there'll be any weddings that will be taking place this year. So it means that 8 or 9 months of the year that the wedding industry is completely closed. Matric dancers who we relied on, you're not allowed to have a matric dance. Other occasion wear, that there is no engagements or Christmas dinners, et cetera. And the list goes on. I don't know when, what are we going to do? So how are we going to deal with this? Is that obviously our staff, we've had to obviously put our staff on short time, on furlough. We've had to close down underperforming stores. We have to talk to all stakeholders in terms of trying to assist us. And it's something that we're trying to get through. It's not easy. I think the toughest of the lot are the landlords. I mean, I understand that they too have got their own challenges in terms of that they've got gearing and mortgages that they need to obviously service, but very difficult when you're paying more rentals and there's no people coming through the door. Very difficult when you have to open your doors, but you're not allowed to have an event. And so the demand is weak. So, so what I say is that we just got to be, we have to hope that we can work with our stakeholders going forward, that they will be kind to us and we kind to them, because ultimately the weddings will come back and the matric dancers will come back. And we're hoping that there will be pent up demand, and hopefully next year there'll be 300,000 or 400,000 weddings, and making up, and because people will get married and they will, life will continue, but we've got to actually get through the next period. Another, also very, very hard hit is another business that we have that is Madluli Safari Lodge, which is a Section 12J venture capital company. For those of you who don't know, anyone who invests into a Section 12J company is entitled to 100% deduction from their taxable income. So you invest 100, you get 45 back from the receiver, and you have risk capital at 55. And what we've done is we had a joint venture, we have got a joint venture with the Madluli community, which is just by Numbi Gate in the Kruger Park. And we have just completed a 100-bed lodge, which we completed on the 18th of January. And then on the 25th or 26th of February, we had to shut down, and we continue to shut down. And we don't know again when we're going to open. Obviously, our lodge was targeted at international travel. And in the very short time before the lodge, obviously with marketing, we had occupancies of plus 70% for the latter part of the year. And it was, I must say, it's a fantastic product. It's well situated, it's well priced, and our lodge is closed. It's a community project that we're working with them, so we have to be sensitive. It's a rural area that we're working with communities, and we continue to have to ensure that they still in livelihoods area. The leisure and hospitality industry in South Africa probably employs 1.5 million people. It's a massive, a lot of jobs that are currently that are going to be lost. And I can tell you, it's unbelievable how many downstream jobs are those people directly in the hospitality industry who are working in hotels and lodges. It's all the downstream, it's all the restaurants, all the tour operators, all the photographers, all the curio stores who are all going to be affected as a result of, obviously alleviate this, is that we're focusing on the local market. The good thing is that 55 to 60% of leisure travel in South Africa is actually South Africans themselves. I think the South African market will have the best opportunity now to choose their locations at relatively discounted prices, because of places that they couldn't afford before, because obviously all the hotels and lodges are looking to actually take in these people. And I think we're very well poised for when the market does open, is that, even if I say so myself, is that we probably have the best leisure product in well-priced, well-located, in the bush, and in the Kruger Park, located in the Kruger Park. We all grew up going to the Kruger National Park, to what we would want it to be. And I think we have now been able to provide a first-class luxury 5-star product, well-priced, that families and individuals will go to. We just now have to put a lot of pressure on government to open the doors and let us travel, because, they're letting people, full taxis and go to casinos and all the rest of it, but you can't necessarily go on a leisure holiday where you can still have all all the health precautions, etc. So we're confident that with the product, we understand our investors in the 12J understand that COVID has hit them. It's a lifestyle product, because not only do you get a financial return when you actually invest into the Madluli Safari Lodge 12J, but you can use for 10 years which is, you know, been excited, and our investors have understood this, and they've been sympathetic, and we'll work with them. You know, so as soon as the doors open, we'll be, you know, be able to accommodate them and move forward. But I think things are tough, and you know, I think what Clive said, I think it's going to still get tougher. I say, working with the banks in some cases, I think they have, you know, I really think they are sympathetic. I don't think they're very kind to hotels, but I mean, but generally they in other businesses that we're involved in, I think they're working with us. I just wish, you know, the landlords would take a trick or two out of their book and work with the people as well. Rabbi Stern, you have to
thank you. After that report, should I start telling you about the shuls? That's not my topic for tonight. Thank you, Clive. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Rabbi Masinta and Chabad of Zoom, for inviting us to join this panel. Viktor Frankl, in his book Man's Search for Meaning, he writes that there are two types of people. And he experienced this obviously during the Holocaust, during the atrocities and the tragedies. And he said there are those who allowed for the circumstances to dominate over them during this time. And there were others who made sure that they stayed in control, despite the horror that they were seeing from day to day. How did those people manage to stay on top and stay with it and stay together and hold themselves during what was the most horrendous experience in their lives and in our modern day history? He said, because they were searching for meaning through every bit of pain. Now, I read this book, specifically, I started reading it during lockdown. And as I'm reading through Viktor Frankl's writings, and he's describing what he's going through in the times of the Holocaust, and he's putting together his theories of psychology and how he lived with that through the terrible tragedies of the Holocaust. Now, for those who don't know, he had the opportunity of actually leaving Vienna before the war and going to America, where he would have been safe. And yet he stayed back. And why did he stay back in Vienna? Because his parents were there, and he couldn't leave his parents. And in his book, he writes how to him, that was a very, very meaningful decision in his life, and it motivated every step of his way through that journey of the Holocaust and the camps. And as he survived, he was still very confident in that decision, because for him, it was more important to stay with his parents than to flee for freedom in the free world of America. So he says those people that manage to stay on top of things are the people that look for meaning in every bit of pain. Circumstances are out of our control, but attitude is in our control. So in preparing for tonight, I was thinking, we're looking for solutions. We're looking for answers. We don't have many solutions, as you heard from Clive and Jeff. Times are tough. The economy is tough. Business is tough. And so the economy has crumbled. Work is challenging. Finances is tough. Health is tough. So what are we supposed to do? And I think that Viktor Frankl's words of man's search for meaning couldn't be more relevant for us in a generation post-Holocaust. During a time like this, a world pandemic, is to look for meaning, because the economy can't give us the meaning that we're looking for. Work may not be able to give us that meaning that we're looking for. So let's look for meaning. During this tough time, if we can focus on meaningful experiences, that will give us a sense of purpose to help us ride this wave through this pandemic. And this is the act that we're seeing. And Clive mentioned this. He mentioned the Rambam Fund. He mentioned the Gesher initiative to try and help individuals and businesses through this. There are so many volunteers in our community that have given of their time and of their means to try and help others. Why? Because meaning such as chesed, such as charity, such as tzedakah, and righteousness and kindness during this time really gives us a sense of meaning. That's what's going to keep us that will keep us motivated and focused. Is reach out to help an elderly person who's stuck at home in lockdown, or somebody else who's in quarantine and doesn't have where to go and what to do and finances to help, or someone who's lost their job. As I said, going to work isn't very meaningful today. We have to go to work and earn a living, as difficult as it is. But we got to look for more meaningful experiences during this time. And if we look for tzedakah and chesed and kindness and generosity that we can help the other person with during this time, it will actually give us the motivation and the meaning to keep us moving through this difficult time, because we know that we're here for a reason. We're here to help someone else through the process. I once read a story about a store owner who was living in Crown Heights, actually in Brooklyn. And he was a Holocaust survivor. And one time he shared his story. He shared his story of how he survived. And he said that it was one night that the Nazis drove around in their vehicle and they picked up residents from around the neighborhood and were going to drive them to a camp quite far out. And it was freezing cold. And he says, and I was picked up that night. They pulled me out of my house. A few of us got together, they pulled us into the truck, they loaded us in, and they were driving us to the freezing cold nights, heading towards a concentration camp. And as we were going, they stopped in the middle of the way. It was a long drive. They stopped there. And they stopped there, and they just stopped the car and left us out in the freezing night. And they disappeared to go sleep somewhere more comfortable. And he says, I saw next to me an elderly man. And I could see that he was battling. He was battling. And I said to myself, I better warm him up, because if I don't warm him up, who knows if he's going to survive the night. And so I sat there the entire night rubbing this man, trying to warm up his limbs throughout the entire night. And he says, in the morning, I looked around and it was just the two of us alive in the vehicle. Nobody else made it out that night. And I'll tell you why he survived. He survived because I was rubbing him and keeping him warm. I survived because I was rubbing and keeping him warm. And because I helped him and because I supported him and showed him the generosity and the kindness and the warmth, it actually helped me through this as well. And I think that could be a sense of meaning to help us and motivate us through this difficult time. Rabbi Akiva, the famous Rabbi Akiva, had a daughter. Rabbi Akiva saw and knew that when his daughter gets married, the Talmud tells us, Rabbi Akiva knew that his daughter may not live the next night if she gets married. He saw by Ruach HaKodesh, by divine inspiration, that she wouldn't live. But she decided to get married, and the next morning she wakes up. And Rabbi Akiva is stunned. Hey, you're alive. How did you survive this? She says, funny you mentioned this, because next to my bed was a snake. A deadly snake. And inside the snake was a pin from my hair that I had taken out that night before going to sleep and putting it into my bedside. I obviously poked the snake with this pin, and it was lying there by my bed. Rabbi Akiva says it was a miracle. It was a miracle. I saw that you were going to die the night of your wedding. And now this snake, you managed to kill it before it killed you. What did you do special yesterday or in the days building up to your wedding? What did you do? Something you did helped you. And she says, what did I do? I don't recall doing much. He's pushing her, saying, no, you did something. You must have done something to survive that snake next to your bed that night. What did you do? And she says, well, look, during the wedding, a poor man opened the door to the reception hall. And he looked like he was starving. He was so hungry. So I stepped out of the circles, with the brides and the chatan and the groom and the bride dancing. I stepped out of the circle and I went to him and I said to him, please come in. I want to give you something to eat. And I fed him. And Rabbi Akiva says, that's exactly what saved you. Because the sages tell us the famous Hebrew phrase, tzedakah tatzil mimavet, that righteousness saves us from death. And the act of righteousness which you did to that poor man on the wedding night is what actually saved you. So that's the theme that I wanted to share with you, is that through an act of kindness, through an act of generosity, through an act of tzedakah, besides helping someone else, we actually help ourselves through it. We help ourselves spiritually because it protects us, and we help ourselves emotionally as well because it motivates us and keeps us focused and gets us through difficult times. When it comes to the word of tzedakah, there's some myths out there that I want to sort of to address. We got to talk, how does the world translate tzedakah? Tzedakah is often translated as generosity, right? Charity. People see charity as giving away money, right? I earn hard-earned money and I give away my money. In Judaism, that's not the way we perceive tzedakah. That's not the way we translate tzedakah, and it's not the way we perceive tzedakah. Tzedakah comes from the word tzedek. Tzedek means righteousness. Charity seems to indicate that I'm a charitable guy. I'm a generous guy. I'm happy to give of my funds to you. That's not the way Judaism sees it. Judaism sees tzedakah as righteousness, meaning it's the right thing to do. If I have what to help someone else with, I shall. And it's not always in the case of financial, and maybe in the case of a listening ear, and maybe advice, maybe guidance, and maybe even crossing someone the road if they need some assistance. Doesn't always translate into finances. It means helping someone else with what I have and they may not have. And the translation is righteousness. Why is it righteous? Because God's appointed me as his conduit to help someone else. That's what I'm here for. I'm in this world. What's my purpose? What's my mission? To try and help someone else. And it's during a crisis like this when we realize our purpose even more than ever before. Because when things are going well and things are functioning and the wheels are rolling, well, I'm chasing my own needs and my own success and my own business and my own this and my own that. And the moment everything goes into chaos, we suddenly start to realize the needs, yes, of our own, of ourselves, but also the needs of someone else who needs a hand, who needs some assistance, who needs some help. And so the first myth we want to remove is it's not charitable and it's not generous, it's righteous. It's the right thing to do. The second thing is, let's not look at money that we give away or tzedakah that we give as giving away. The rabbis tell us it's in fact an investment. I'm not a businessman. I'm sitting here with two businessmen on our panel here. But one who gives charity shouldn't see it as sharing my money with somebody else. One who gives charity should see it as an investment. God tells us that when you give tzedakah and help one of my children, one of my brothers and one of your brothers and sisters in the world, what you're actually doing is you're planting the seeds to grow much more success for yourself. We see that from the Hebrew phrase in the Torah. The Torah says, aser ta'aser, which is the verse that commands us to give a tenth of our produce or a tenth of our income towards a needy person or towards charity, towards tzedakah. Aser ta'aser. And the question's asked, why the double terminology? You shall certainly give your tenth, your tithe. And the answer the Talmud tells us is you got to read it as follows. Aser kedei shetit asher. Give your tithe, give your tenth in order that you should become wealthy. Because when we give of ourselves to somebody else, not only are we helping them, we're actually generating income for ourselves. Because God says to us, if you're able to share of your own, it's actually investing your own. You're going to make back that money many times over, many times over. And in fact, I've had people and friends in my community at Sydenham Shul who have shared with me during challenging times. Often they've shared and they've said, you know, my business made money beyond what I expected. Business deals were successful beyond what I expected. And often it boils down to, and they point to the charity they gave. Rabbi, they say to me, it must have been the charity I gave, because there's no other logical explanation to explain how my businesses were profitable or how my deals were profitable. It must be because I gave that tzedakah. And to hear that from a businessman, to hear that from a rabbi, well, it's easy to say. To hear it from a businessman is inspiring, and I've heard it from a number of people throughout the years. We've spoken about meaning. We've spoken about health and protecting us from death and keeping us healthy. We've spoken about building up wealth. All of these are the gains of tzedakah, of chesed, of kindness, of generosity. The word giving in Hebrew is a palindrome. It's a Natan. And I think Chabad House actually runs a project called Project Natan. Natan is a palindrome, both in Hebrew and in English, because when you give, you actually receive in return. And this is a time when we can dig deep and try and find what we have inside of us to try and help someone else. If it's finances, to help through the different funds, through individual assistance, and even if it's not finances, to find other ways of doing it. The Lubavitcher Rebbe promoted a project called the Tzedakah Project, where he wanted people to fill up tzedakah boxes, charity boxes. In fact, to him, it wasn't even important what name of organization was on that box. It's quite mind-boggling. You know, most organizations are printing labeled charity boxes with their logos and their names, that everybody should know where this tin is going once it's full. The Rebbe pushed and said, it's not about the organization. It's about the act of kindness. Let's encourage people to be kind and to give. And so he created this campaign of tzedakah pushkas, tzedakah boxes, where everyone gets a tzedakah box into their homes, even encouraged to put it into the kitchen. Why in the kitchen? He says, before you feed yourself, put a coin in. Put a coin into the charity box. Doesn't matter what charity box it is. And I know that Chabad House launched the ARC project, which was these ARC designed charity boxes to encourage people to give to whatever institution, organization they want, but just to put those coins in and create that noise of sharing, of giving, of helping someone else. In fact, I want to end with one last thing that I came across in the last day or so. And that is an answer that the Tzemach Tzedek was the third Lubavitcher Rebbe who lived 200 years ago. And in his time, there was a pandemic. And they wrote to him and they said to him, what should we do? People are dying. We need to save ourselves and protect our communities and our families. What are we supposed to do? And the Tzemach Tzedek it's written, actually, his response is written. And he said, one of the ways of protecting yourselves is to give charity, no matter what denomination, doesn't matter what amount, to give charity on the hour, every hour. That was his advice. On the hour, every hour, your alarm clock should ring and you should go to your tzedakah box, to your box and put the coins in. In fact, he says that over a day, it should come to 18 times. How did he get to 18 times? Well, if you work it out, there are 12 hours in a day, or generally. He may have been awake for longer than 12 hours. And then he said before every tefillah, before every prayer of the morning, afternoon, and evening prayers, you put another one in. So it comes to 12 plus 3 is 15. He may have been awake for many more hours than 12 hours. For him, it was an 18 coin or 18 amount project in every hour. And so maybe that's something for us to consider, is as the hour rings, what can I do? Can I phone someone? Can I help someone? Can I put a charity into the box? And please God, through that, not only are we going to be able to help others during this challenging time, but in fact, we are going to receive in return, because more than we give through our tzedakah, we actually receive in return. That's my suggestion for a bit of help and guidance during this time. And hopefully that will assist us all through this process.
Guys, absolutely outstanding, all of you. I just want to say thank you so much. There's one question to each one of you. Firstly, to Clive, somebody's written in as follows. Clive, as a banker, at the time of reduction and reduced salaries, can't insurance companies give a payment holiday? Maybe that's already being done and they're not aware of it, but that's the question to you.
Yeah, I work for Standard Bank and we do have a subsidiary, Liberty. I'm not aware of payment holidays of that nature within the insurance industry at this point in time. I guess the interests are somewhat differently aligned. With the bank, we generally have our capital at risk, and therefore we also incentivize to be aligned to you. Whereas with insurance, I guess it's an expense item and therefore somewhat differently considered. But I'm not aware of anything at this point in time in terms of payment holidays from the insurance companies.
Okay. To Jeff, what is your advice to the tourism industry?
So my advice to the tourism industry is that we need to lobby government and they need to open up to leisure travel in South Africa to South Africans. We have to take the necessary precautions, but it will certainly save thousands or hundreds of thousands of jobs and smaller type businesses. my advice is that also to look into your insurance policies, because generally there's a business interruption and there's a huge issue going on currently where insurance companies are not acknowledging the fact that COVID has affected business interruptions. In most hotel policies, you have a pandemic type clause, which the insurance companies are not acknowledging. There has been one insurance company to date, which is Outsurance, which has acknowledged business interruptions and made payments, but the rest of the hospitality industry is taking on the insurance companies. Even the FSCA has given support to the fact that this business interruption should be considered seriously. I mean, we have to just hang in there. I believe that South Africa is one of the best tourist destinations in the world. I've traveled quite extensively. I look at Australia, where they get 40 million visitors a year. South Africa gets 10 million visitors a year. And I believe that South Africa has far more to offer than that of Australia. And so I think there's huge growth in that, potential that we have. I think government needs to step up and help us, actually in a whole lot of stuff, whether it's in marketing, whether it's in visas, getting rid of these birth certificates for kids to travel, and make life a lot easier for visitors to actually come and visit our shores.
Please God, eh? Okay, so just the last question goes to Rabbi Stern, and it's Rabbi Stern, it's a yes or no answer. So I think you spoke about
A rabbi gives a yes or no answer. Let me hear.
That's the question over here, and it's a blunt question actually. First of all, you spoke about the tzedakah, charity is matzil memavis mamish. Charity can push away a decree that even if, God forbid, somebody's being decreed to die, just throwing a few pennies into a charity box can annul that decree, from the story of Rabbi Akiva. And you also mentioned that charity brings wealth. And you mentioned how the Rebbe spoke about how charitable one has to be. So I think the question to you is, and it really is a yes or no answer, we would like to ask you for a donation after hearing all the way you all spoke, but particularly you, we'd like to ask you to donate another 2 webinar speeches to us in the near future. Is it a yes or no?
You know the story about the shul that went to find a one-handed rabbi? Yes
or no? Okay, guys, thank you very much for joining. And really what we actually learned tonight is that the power of, while there's a challenging situation, as God decreed this to happen, God can remove it immediately. And please God, through us all doing that, what we have to do. Now Hashem have lifted the decree, and we should all be blessed with absolute health, and we should be smitten with wealth. And the ultimate blessing of all, the revelation of Mashiach, will be no more sickness, no more suffering, no more war, and no more poverty. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye, guys. Nice to share the panel, guys. Keep well. Have a good evening.
And you, all
too.
the best,
Thanks,
Rabbi.
Rabbi.
Well done.
Take care.
Cheers,
Take care.
guys. All the best.
Thank you, Clive. Cheers.
All the best, Jeff. Good luck.
You too. Cheers.